Hey everyone, I am here with Elliot Gaff and Katy Fazio, and last week they both were delegates to General Synod, and Synod is the national gathering of our denomination, the United Church of Christ, that meets every 3 years. It's made up of delegates from United Church of Christ congregations, from conferences, from really any body that represents the church, really all over the country. And it was pretty great that we have two people from our congregation who got to attend this meeting, and we wanted to give Katy and Elliot a chance to share with you all about what that experience was like, what they learned, any sort of takeaways that they'd like to that we think our church could really sort of glean from that experience. I'll let them introduce themselves in a minute. I think most of you know them. Katy is our Minister of Children and Families, and is also almost finished with seminary and is in the process of becoming ordained as a United Church of Christ pastor. Katy did not grow up in the United Church of Christ, so this is kind of her chosen church home. And then many of you, especially those of you who've been a part of the former First Congregational Church for some time, have known Elliot for pretty much his entire life. Elliot grew up in this church, is now a college student at the University of Vermont. And so I'm just going to stop introducing you now because I think you all can probably do that better yourselves. So I'll just invite both of you just to share a word of introduction. I think most people know you, but I'm sure as our church is growing and changing all the time, there are some people who haven't had the chance to meet you yet. So Katy, why don't we start with you, and then Elliot will turn to you.
Sure, yeah. So I'm Katy. I started at the former First Congregational. I was trying to figure out, I think about 3 years ago. And so this is actually my second time at Synod since I've been working um, at this church in Milton. Um, and yeah, I'm still in seminary and slowly approaching uh, getting ordained one day.
All right, Elliot, how about
Hey,
you?
um, I grew up in the UCC. My parents weren't originally members of the UCC, but they joined the church, and then I was born, and so I've been in basically the same church. It used to be First Congregational Church, my whole life since I was a baby, and it's been really nice to get more involved since I've like left and gone to college. Um, I thought that I'd lose contact with that community, and it's been really nice to like stay in contact with everybody.
Awesome. Thank you both. So Katy, I want to just start with you and just kind of ask you to kind of share a little bit more about what General Synod is. I think there are a number of people in our church who know that we are a part of the United Church of Christ denomination, but not totally sure what that means, what Synod is, how the wider church works. So if you could kind of just briefly describe what General Synod is and how a little more about how you and Elliot came to be there, that would be great.
Yeah, well, you gave it a really good introduction already. I always kind of explain it to people as it's like kind of like Model UN. I did Model UN in high school, so I like went and I was on a committee and we did resolutions and we voted on things. Um, and it is that. It's also just an expression of how our denomination functions. We have a lot of different roots, but one of them is the congregational tradition, where decisions are made by the body rather than from top down, they're made bottom up. And so there are a number of different settings of the church that send delegates, but the largest group of delegates are from local churches. So there are about 700 delegates who have a vote at Synod from all over the country. all different churches from different traditions, but all part of the United Church of Christ. We all get assigned randomly to a committee, which is working on a resolution that has already been proposed and voted on by a conference or a different group in the denomination. And then, depending on the work that that committee does, that resolution goes to the floor of Synod to be discussed and voted on by the whole group of delegates. And as far as we also vote on electing officers to the church. My first synod, we elected the current general minister and president, Karen Georgia Thompson, which is really an amazing thing to be a part of. And this synod, we voted in the associate general minister, Sherry Prestman, and some bylaws changes, the sort of like governance business kind of things. But as far as how Elliot and I got to be there, our church, UCC Milton, is part of Southern New England Conference of the UCC, which is sometimes referred to as SNOOK. I think that's the most fun way to refer to any denominational body, SNOOK. And it's the largest conference in the UCC. It's actually a merger of the Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut conferences. So sitting actually in our church, United Congregational Church in Milton, in this United conference in a United Church of Christ, like it's just very, we're really living that at all levels of our denomination, like all
Yeah, a
expressions
lot of
down.
coming together in there.
Yeah, right. And that's part of this, I think, one of the big stories of the UCC and what was sort of lived out for me over Synod. But anyway, Elliot and I were both part of the delegation from the Southern New England Conference. We were both nominated by somebody in the conference to serve as delegates, and we both said yes. So it was really fun.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. And I'll just kind of throw a tidbit in there that I think one of the coolest things about the United Church of Christ is that many denominations were birthed out of division. That a church could no longer get along or had irreconcilable theological differences, and so they went their separate ways. The founding of the United Church of Christ in 1957 was different streams, different traditions choosing to unite, choosing to come together. So kind of here sitting in our local church, just kind of living through a uniting process, consolidation process. It's kind of part of the whole DNA of our denomination. It's kind of how we were founded, as kind of consolidating and uniting. It's how our conference has emerged, and it's how our local churches emerged. So I just think that's a pretty cool thread that weaves through there. Elliot, I'm going to turn to you now. So you grew up in our church, and while I know you've had other experiences at college, I'm guessing that being a delegate at a national church gathering is a new experience for you in a lot of ways. And so I think maybe one of the things that I think is pretty cool about gatherings like General Synod is that it shows us how large and how diverse the church, kind of capital C, really is. That I think all of us can kind of just get to assuming that church is like our own local church and what we experience, but it's so much bigger and wider and more diverse than that. And so I'm wondering, what is something that you've learned about kind of the church, kind of big C church, by being at Synod this week, and how that is kind of similar or different than what you've experienced kind of growing up in our congregation?
Well, I definitely learned more about church polity than I ever thought I would. Um, but apart from that, which is kind of interesting because I'm kind of geeky about that stuff, but it was really interesting to see just how much larger it was than just like the single church. Like, I knew that UCC was our denomination, and I knew that there were more churches like our church, like across at least New England. I checked out the UCC church in Burlington a few times when I came to college, just because I was curious to see what it looked like. And to kind of connect with the faith community there. And it's like similar but different. Like a lot of things that are similar, a lot of things that are different. Same thing with like the former East Congregational Church. It's like when we visited there, it's like, yeah, it's the same, but it's a little different. And I didn't realize just how much larger our congregation was. Like it's not just a lot of churches in isolation, even if sometimes it feels like that. It's like a whole community, a whole UCC community, all interwoven. And that was super cool to see. I didn't know what to expect going in, but I definitely didn't expect this overwhelming feeling of like community and being welcomed. Like when you visit, I have like memories of visiting my grandmother at her church when I was a kid, and like, you know, like being welcomed into Sunday school like I was a member of the congregation, and like, you know, being greeted by members from coffee hour. And so it's like even though you're a stranger, you're greeted like family. And that's kind of what it felt like meeting everybody. It's like, yeah, we were there for business, but it was like going to your friend's church and everybody being excited to see you. That was a really cool experience.
Awesome. Thank you, Elliot. So kind of my next question is for both of you. Whoever wants to jump in can go, but I kind of started thinking about this because, you know, during summer, and I think both of you have experienced this, that in summer worship, we've started doing something called the Bethel Table, where we invite people to share experiences during their summer travels or even their own homes about times or places where they've experienced God's presence. And Bethel actually is a Hebrew word that literally means the house of or the place of God. Kind of this idea that whether we're in our local church, in the sanctuary, or in our house, or on a trip somewhere, or wherever, that there's nowhere we can go that God's presence is not with us. And Katy, I know this is true for you because you shared at the Bethel table this past Sunday. But I'm wondering, for both of you, have you had kind of a Bethel moment at Synod? This kind of an experience where, I don't know, whether it was during a worship service or a part of the gathering or just some sort of community event. I know there's a number of kind of action opportunities at Synod. Just any of those things, just a moment where you like just felt, yeah, God is here right now, that you would be willing to share with us.
Katie, would you like to go first or?
I can go first. Yeah, that's fine. Um, there were so many for me. I think the whole week and away was a Bethel moment. And what I shared on Sunday, when you brought my water from Kansas City, and I brought one of Elliot's earrings, put it on the table that he gave me to share. But um, one thing that I didn't know how it was going to go, was a resolution to call for an end of the genocide in Palestine, and I just wasn't sure. I'd been to another synod, so I knew that these kinds of conversations could get really heated. Um, and I didn't know what was going to happen. And Elliot was actually on that committee that worked on the resolution. Um, but from like the minute that we got there, almost, it was nothing like how I expected it to go. Um, the Associate General Minister, Sherry Pressman, spoke at the opening plenary about her visit to Israel, Palestine. There were vigils, there were vigils, there were standouts, there were workshops, there were people, everyone was wearing, I mean, not everyone, but a lot of people were wearing pins or keffiyehs, and I had expected it to be very vitriolic when we got to the floor, but it wasn't. There were difficult conversations, but everybody approached them so carefully, caringly, and so like in such a heartfelt way that it just really gave me hope, that we, as a denomination, could take such a strong and important stance. And there was one moment in particular, when there was an amendment on the floor, and I was feeling really anxious about it. And I walked back. There's kind of a rope where like the delegates can be in front of, and the people who are just there to watch can't come in front. But I walked back to where some of the onlookers were. And there was a retired pastor there who I'd talked to a few times who was there with the UCC Movement for Palestinian Solidarity. And I was feeling so anxious. And I just walked over and sat down next to him. He put his arm around me. And I just sat there with him watching, and I just felt like this sense of ease and peace, where I really felt like we're continuing the work that's been done by our ancestors, our spiritual ancestors, and that God is with us. And so, yeah, that like extension of grace from him to me just was so needed. And that kind of feeling is what I'm carrying with me. And then we voted that resolution through with no amendments. Overwhelmingly, it was, I think, 594 to 32. Yeah.
Thanks, Katy.
That was so well said. I feel a lot of the same ways about the amendments. I've also cared really strongly about that resolution, and I was also feeling a lot of anxiety about it. One of the things I really love about the UCC is how deeply our denomination cares about like the people, not just the people who are like a part of our congregation, but all people. And I love like the social justice and the advocacy work that we do. I think that there needs to be a lot more of that from Christians and from the world. But I guess there were a lot of moments when I felt really connected to God. A lot of it was like in tandem with like work that felt important or work that felt meaningful. I went to a couple of the vigils and I was able to stand with people in the MPS with signs at the top of escalators. There were times when I was like just, singing like Jesus camp songs with some of the other youth delegates that I made friends with in the hallways, like in between workshops or in between like the floor and the other rooms of the convention center. I think I'm also really thankful for all the opportunities there were to like pray and focus on breathing and like be mindful woven all throughout Synod. I know, Katy, you talked about it being like feeling similar to Model UN, and I don't have that same experience in Model UN, but I know that feeling of like we're here with a purpose and we have our points and we have our resolutions and everything's very analytical and we're going to get from like point A to point B. And I loved how centered and connected people felt or felt like they were trying to be. Like there were times when our discussions got heated when we like stopped to pray as a congregation, as a denomination, as a whole group. And those felt, I'm having trouble finding the words to describe just how impactful it felt to always be like tied back or like bringing our focus and our attention back to, it's not about us right here in the moment. It's about something greater than us. It's about what we're part of. It's about what we're working towards. It's about what we have been and what we're going to be. And I think that the ability to hold that perspective while also like doing the hard work in the moment of like making amendments and voting on resolutions and doing all of this like technical like work was amazing. it definitely made me feel connected to God, made me feel connected to like the greater sense. I hope that answers your question.
No, I think that's great, Elliot. I guess one thing that makes me think of is that I think one gift that the church has to offer the world is that um, we can, when we're at our best, we can model that the work and the outcome that we're hoping for matters, but also how we do the work matters. That choosing to try to get from point A to point B, like you said, um, in a way where we're grounded and centered and prayerful and uh, acting with compassion towards one another. I think sometimes is every bit as much important as the outcome that we're hoping to achieve. And so I do think that's I can imagine that would have been a powerful, many powerful moments of kind of pausing to pray, not as a distraction from the work, but as an essential part of the work. So I think that was really, really well said.
Yeah, there's something I have a connection to something Katie said earlier about our church being like bottom up instead of top down, with so much of a like the way we make decisions as a church being about the process of how we make decisions. One of the speakers at Synod, whose name I'm forgetting, said that it would be really easy to have one person in charge make the decisions for everyone else. It's like then we wouldn't have this big long conference with a lot of work being done. It would just be like an easy decision. But if it's an easy decision, it's rarely a meaningful decision.
Hmm.
And I think that all of the work that goes into having the tough conversations and being in community with one another and being willing to hear out people whose opinions are different than you is really impactful. I was on Committee 11, and there was one person who I sat near one of the days who actually proposed a amendment that didn't get adopted into the resolution. And I think that I hold a lot of different perspectives to him, and I think I have a lot of different ways of viewing the world and interacting with the world. But I still, um, I don't know. After our committee meeting, I went up to him and I was like, "Can you just tell me more about where you're coming from?" Because I didn't understand where he was coming from. Like to me, it's like, oh, it feels so obvious to make the decision that we need to make, but it feels so easy to think I know everything that I know. But even if maybe I disagree with someone, where there's always common ground. And sorry, I'm trying to think of how to say that a little bit differently. I don't have to agree with you politically. I don't have to agree with you like theologically or spiritually or about this and this and this, but there's if we're able to talk about how we have differences in opinions and we're able to find common ground, I think we're able to talk as people, not just as like our belief systems, because we're more than just what we believe. And even if I disagree with you on a lot of things and feel kind of uncomfortable with the way you view things, I think it's more about the journey because that lets us both grow.
Yeah, absolutely. Katie, I'm going to turn to you for the next one. I kind of already mentioned that you did not grow up in the United Church of Christ, but going through the ordination process to become a UCC minister, this is kind of your chosen denomination. And so I guess the question is kind of what is something about our denomination, about the United Church of Christ, maybe that was on display at Synod that really makes you feel like, yeah, the UCC is where it's at for me.
Yeah, if you had asked me this when I chose the United Church of Christ, I would have said it's because we're the most progressive denomination and that The way that we've like led the way in social justice issues is really meaningful and important to me, and that's the kind of church I want to serve. And that's still so true. But especially after this synod, you mentioned this before, the story of how the United Church of Christ became the United Church of Christ, but we hear it a lot, so I'll just repeat it because that's part of the tradition. Um, is that when these denominations, it was the merger of two merged denominations. So there were four denominations. Two of them each had merged. So then there were two denominations, and then they were merging. And there was also a huge influence from the Afro-Christian Convention, although they weren't officially recognized as an influence until recently. But all these folks came together in 1957, and they were intentional that in 1957 they were not going to address any doctrinal issues. They were not going to hash out like all of the governance of the new denomination. But they just trusted that by entering into covenant together, that God would guide them to emotional about church polity. They just trusted that God would tell them what to do. And I think that that commitment to being in relationship with each other, even when it's not going to be perfect and it's going to be messy, I think that that is why we've been able to be these leaders as a denomination. That why we're able to be the first denomination to ordain a openly gay clergy, be the first denomination to ordain women. It's because we disagree that some people are able to be ahead of us, and the rest of us are able to follow. And so that shows up at Synod. I think you've heard, I think that's been like so clear, that the differences show up at Synod, and it's painful, and it's messy, and the Holy Spirit is so present and so like close and near and felt, and and like listened to, and that's why the UCC is my home.
Thanks, Katy. Yeah, it makes me, I love what you said about you think that we've been able to lead the way on so many issues because we allow for disagreement. I don't know if that's exactly how you said it, but I do think kind of sometimes religion and Christianity kind of at its worst is this kind of coercive force to say you have to think like me, be like me, act like me, or you're out. And it's something I think pretty unique about our denomination that we say we value diversity in all its forms, and that includes kind of what we believe theologically, ideologically, politically. My guess is not everyone in our church knows that in our bylaws, we thought it was so important that in our bylaws we say that every member has the right to follow their own conscience in matters of faith and theology, which means that every single person in our church has the right to disagree with anything I say from the pulpit at any given time that you want to, or anybody who is in that role. And that's not a vice, but that's encouraged. And I do think that being a part of a local church and a denomination that really says that we can be united even when we don't agree is a pretty important thing. Eli, you've been a part of the United Church of Christ through First Congregational Church and now United Congregational Church your whole life. But kind of as I said earlier, my guess is that there are a lot of people, and I've kind of noticed this particularly up here in New England, where there's the kind of this long Congregationalist tradition that I think many people think of our church as kind of a Congregationalist church, meaning that there's not a external body that can force us to do anything. I think that many people in our congregation don't know a whole lot about the United Church of Christ as a denomination. And so I'm wondering if you saw something or learned something or experienced something at Synod that you think is particularly important for our local church to really learn about or pay attention to.
That's a really good question. This might be kind of a silly answer, but I think the biggest thing I learned is that our denomination is really cool, actually.
Yeah.
Because it's like I knew our church was cool, but it's like I said it a little bit before, but it is that feeling of being a part of something greater. I think sometimes people have a tend to see like greater bodies, especially bodies that govern or that govern as controlling. So like, oh, if we're part of something larger than us, like not just our congregation, but a network of congregations that all together make up the UCC, then our governing body, our it's national presence, I think it's called national setting. The national setting will like dictate what we can do and what we can't do. But it's I've been in the UCC my whole life, and the reason that maybe it's easy to ignore that bigger part is because it doesn't tell us what to do. It's like we tell it what to do through our actions and through our beliefs. And I think that kind of switching that perspective of like, oh, it's them up there who decide what we do and we can just ignore them because we're our own congregation. That's like, no, what we do here impacts what they do up there. And so if we believe something really strongly, if we're, speaking with our actions and doing something really revolutionary and exciting, then it's like, we'll make them listen because it's not so much that we're their congregation, it's our congregation, it's us together. And that's pretty cool. Let me think of a moment in Synod to answer the second part of your question. In the convention hall, there are a bunch of people tabling. I love talking to people who are tabling. It might be because I'm an extrovert or because I'm in college right now, but I love being able to go up to people who have like their flyers and their buttons and their pamphlets or their zines, and they're like, it's like you care about something so passionately that you wanted to share that with other people. And there's something that feels so magical about that. It's like the same feeling I get walking into a library where it's like, wow, you cared about something so much, you wrote a book about it, and now I get to read that book. It's like you cared about something so much that you're sitting at a table with a color scheme and like a matching t-shirt, and you want to tell me about that thing because you care. And it was cool because there was all of these like UCC organizations or Christian organizations interwoven, like sharing what they cared about. And it was a lot of the same things that I see like in Burlington and in Boston, just with like a UCC lens. And that was so cool to see.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. I love what you said, like kind of a silly answer, but the denomination is really cool. So I mean, I guess maybe a homework assignment for everyone watching this video is go research our denomination, the United Church of Christ. It is really cool. There's some great stuff on there. You can sign up for all sorts of newsletters and alerts, and you can learn about what the national setting is doing kind of on our behalf. So both of you have already talked about kind of how you experience the delegates at Synod and the leadership kind of dealing with some challenging moments or in a committee meeting. And so I'm just kind of wondering if there's anything that you learned from that about how to navigate those times, about, there are inevitably going to be times when people have strong feelings about something and may not agree. And I think, one marker of a healthy church versus kind of an unhealthy church is not whether you have conflict. I think conflict is inevitable, but it's how you navigate that. How do you navigate those times when people don't land in the same place or don't have the same opinion? And so I'm wondering if there's any kind of wisdom that you would like to share with us about kind of what you witnessed at Synod about how to handle those situations well that you think would be helpful for us as a local church and members of a local church to pay attention to?
One thing I kind of noticed was like when to talk and when to listen.
Mm.
I feel like when you're in conflict, it's really easy to feel all your emotions first and then want to share all of those emotions immediately. Maybe I just process externally, but I feel like, especially when it's conflicts between not just individuals, but people with shared beliefs and different beliefs, I found it really impactful to be able to listen to the people I disagreed with and the people I agreed with, like together. At Synod, for people who are unfamiliar with the structure, there are different microphones that members from the conference, the delegates, and also people who have voice without vote, but that's a different thing, can get up and like say, I am in agreement with this resolution or this amendment or this, I just want to say the thing, and I agree and I disagree. And the microphones are color coordinated green and red, so you know who's agreeing and who's disagreeing. But when they're up on the screen and when you hear their voice, you're kind of just hearing. And so I think it felt less like, sometimes you're in conflict and it's really easy to want to take sides. It's like, oh, them versus us or us versus them. But it's hard. I feel like you kind of lose the kind of criticality that you need to hold on to when you're so set in this is my belief and this is my value. Because you might, when it's really easy to hold on to that, but it's also really important to listen to the people who disagree with you, because just like you hold really on to your opinion super strong, they do the same thing with their opinion. And the ability to listen to someone who you disagree with doesn't mean that you need to think like them. It just means that it just means that you're willing to open up your ears to really listen to what they're saying. We talk a lot about we're the Congregationalists and the process of discernment, and we're the way we talk at Synod. For a couple of the resolutions, for a lot of our resolutions, we were in strong majority. There was just a vocal minority that really felt strongly and needed to get their voice out. And so I think sometimes when it comes to conflict, it's not about being right or wrong. It's just letting everybody feel heard before you make that decision. Because sometimes it's like, we actually really agree on a lot. It's just the way we came to that decision was different. And you need to make sure that I hear the way you came to that decision in order to feel comfortable making the decision. I'll really quickly share a story. I teach preschool right now. And so a lot of the conflicts I deal with are small scale one-on-one and objectively over very silly things. And sometimes it's not so much about objectively silly things. 4-year-olds have their conflicts are so so human. They're so just very human emotions. And it's a lot of the time it's not about the end result. It's just about how we get there. But that's just my perspective that I'm holding.
Yeah, thanks, Elliot. That's really good.
I'm going to piggyback off of that as the Minister of Children and Families and a mother of children. I believe that toddlers are a mirror to humanity, and that I say this with a lot of love and respect for toddlers and for the church, but we act like toddlers. That when we're making meetings, when we're in meetings making decisions, It's like such a kind of stereotype of like it takes a congregational church like, you know, whatever, 3 hours and 6 meetings and to like change a light bulb or paint a wall or something. Um, and I think there's definitely like knowing when to listen and knowing when to talk and needing to be heard. I think there's like opportunities to be wise in all of those decisions, and opportunities for ego to take over. Um, but I also think that just the process of slowing down, and this is why I'm bringing up toddlers because so much of conflict with parenting a toddler is because I want my toddler to be on my schedule and like get your shoes on, we have to go finish your dinner. I want like it's just sort of like that toddler is trying to figure out how the world works or trying to, you know, learn something that's completely different than my agenda. Um, and I think that's how the Holy Spirit acts too, that we sometimes want things to be done so quickly that we talk too fast and we talk too loud to hear what the Holy Spirit is saying to us. And so I think someone told me that there were over 100 meetings for the consolidation committee, or maybe it was 100 hours, but that number stuck in my head. And I just feel like if it's true, that's why it's gone so well. And that like you just keep moving forward and trying not to get stuck, but trying to listen like really well. So I echo all of what Eli said. And Eli also brought up that in some of these really tense moments, our leaders prayed for us. And that was like a really frequent thing. And when it happened, it slowed us down. And it helped us listen. And there was one vote that was really contentious about bylaws and how we govern ourselves. And the proposal had been brought by the board of the UCC. And um, the board chair stopped us and prayed. And I felt like it was pretty clear that the board chair was sort of on the opposite side of the way that the conversation was going. And so she was praying for our discernment, possibly even knowing that like the delegation was going to vote. You know, I'm sure she worked many, many hours on this proposal, maybe 100 meetings over the course of the last 10 years. Um, but the way that she prayed for us was without an agenda. Like it was just to help us listen to each other. And so I think that's my kind of ongoing prayer for our church and our country and our world is just like help us listen to each other.
Yeah. So I have kind of one final question for you both, and then just anything else that you would like to share that we didn't cover. But that is there kind of an image or a song or kind of a word or a phrase or just kind of anything like that that kind of really represents your experience at Synod that you're taking with you that you would like to share with us?
For me, I think it was definitely one of the songs that we learned. We learned it the first time, I think, in one of the like introductory meetings. You or Katie will know the actual title, but it's the one that's like, Lord, prepare me to be your sanctuary. We sang it a bunch of times all throughout Synod, especially me and some of the other like younger delegates, like under 30 delegates, who um, college students, like young adults. Uh, um, we sang that song like just to each other, like in between meetings and like in transit from room to room, and just enjoying each other's company and being together and enjoying it all. It's like nostalgic in the way that it reminds me of being a kid in the congregation, like singing songs in youth group with other people. That like that nostalgia and connectedness. And on the last day, the day after the last day of Synod, it was the morning, and we were in the lobby of the hotel with our bags, waiting for shuttles, and we sung it one last time and recorded it. And a few older members from the congregation helped us get the harmonies right, so we were able to sing the whole song. And I've listened to the recording a few times since then, and it's scratchy, and you can hear like the din of people talking in the background, and my like audio like is crunchy because of the way my phone recorded on the carpet. But it when I listen to the recording and that song, it brings me right back into Synod and that feelings and all of the feelings that I felt. And being with other people and being in that community surrounded by people who were so similar to me and so different. And that's like, I'll always hold on to that, I think.
It's interesting that you picked that song. That is one of Pastor Shelley's favorite songs, and on her last Sunday before she retired, she had us sing that song together. And so it's kind of pretty cool that Shelley is kind of on, not leaving ministry, because I think we're all ministers, but kind of leaving ministry as a career. And then your group of friends at Synod that are kind of the incoming leaders of the church, both finding that same song really, really powerful and kind of speaking to a profound experience. So
I'm so thankful for the way like faith connects us
mm.
in all these little ways that we don't even see.
What about you, Katy?
I'm going to talk about plants. Um, One of the sort of guiding texts of the worship during Synod, there's an opening worship and a Sunday worship and then a closing worship, was Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. And, we were in Kansas City, Missouri, so it is like plains country. And the theme scripture of the week was Jesus's commandment for the disciples to cast their nets into the deep. And the general minister, Karen Georgia Thompson, preached on this text and said, for people who live on the coast, into the deep is like about the water, right? It's something risky, something unknown, but sweetgrass into the deep is the roots, and it's drawing on deep, deep resources and networking underground, and kind of hunkering down to be able to weather a storm. And of course, like it's both things, both things are true, and having that kind of perspective, that into the deep in the waters and also in the roots of a perennial native grass. Um, yeah, that's what's sticking with me. The knowledge that we can gain from our ecological resources.
Yeah. Well, thank you both so much for chatting. I have loved listening to your experiences. I know our church will as well. Before we kind of sign off here, is there anything else that you would like to share with us that we haven't talked about? Any other takeaways from the experience of going to Synod that you would like to offer?
Not for me.
Yeah, I think we did a really good job of covering.
I think you did a really good job too. Awesome. Well, again, thank you both so much for sharing with us in this way. And I'm excited for ways that more and more people from our church will connect with our larger denomination and learn more about what it means to be a United Church of Christ congregation.